Welcome back to another deep dive. It's so great to have you with us today.
Yeah, thrilled to be here.
Whether you are, listening on your commute, going for a run, or just relaxing at home, we have something really deeply compelling queued up for you today.
We really do.
We're actually stepping away from the massive data sets and broad historical timelines this time.
Right, taking a bit of a pivot.
Exactly. Instead, our source material today is just a single, gripping, firsthand account. It comes directly from the notes of a night shift taxi driver.
And honestly, the prose reads almost like a piece of tense urban fiction.
It really does. But the events are entirely real. And the mission for us today, well, our goal isn't just to recount an interesting story about a driver and a passenger.
No, it's much bigger than that.
Right. We are going to use this incredible document as a lens to explore the unseen responsibilities that are just constantly operating in the background of our cities at night.
The invisible safety nets.
Yes. We want to look at the people who keep the gears turning and who often catch us when we fall, while the rest of the world is basically letting its guard down.
It's such a brilliant piece of writing to analyze because it captures this highly specific slice of life that most of us participate in or at least witness.
Right.
But very few of us actively deconstruct it. When the sun goes down, the entire rhythm of a city transforms. The social rules shift.
Completely.
And the people working those night shifts end up carrying a lot more than just our physical bodies from one location to another. They often become these unspoken guardians of the nighttime economy.
To really understand the weight of that, we need to set the scene using the exact details the driver recorded. So I want you to picture this right now. It is midnight.
Okay.
There are neon lights reflecting on wet pavement. You have music leaking out of the open doors of bars, just mingling with loud laughter drifting down the street.
A classic weekend night.
Exactly. People are out there chasing the promise of a good time. The city feels incredibly alive, buzzing with that specific electric energy that only a nighttime metropolis has.
Yeah, for the people out on the town, it's a playground.
But for a taxi driver, nights like these are just the baseline. It's their office.
What's fascinating here is how the source explicitly describes the driver's perspective. The driver views themselves as a silent witness.
A silent witness. I love that phrasing.
Think about what that actually means in practice. They pick people up, they drop them off, and in between, they listen to half-finished conversations.
Yeah.
They observe the beginnings of romances and the bitter ends of arguments, all in the span of maybe a 10-minute ride.
It's wild to think about.
They become a passive observer to stories that will literally never be told again, creating this unique observational bubble moving through the chaos of the city.
That bubble concept is so interesting to me. You get in, you're in this confined space for a brief window of time, and then you get out. The driver's the only constant. How does that environment affect the way the passengers behave?
Well, sociologists often refer to this kind of environment as a liminal space.
Okay, a liminal space.
Yeah, liminal spaces are those transitional boundaries like waiting rooms, airport terminals, or the back of a taxi that sit between our actual destinations.
You're kind of in transit.
Exactly. Because you aren't at work and you aren't at home, you are essentially nowhere. And in that nowhere, the normal societal rules are temporarily suspended.
People definitely act differently in cabs.
They do. People tend to let their guard down, they overshare, they behave recklessly, or they simply stop pretending to be put together. And the driver is sitting right at the center of that suspended reality, hour after hour.
Okay, let's unpack this specific night. Because the driver is in that exact observational bubble when we reach the inciting incident. Right. The taxi pulls up outside a crowded bar. There's a group of friends standing on the sidewalk, saying their goodbyes far too loudly for the hour.
Standard midnight behavior.
Standard behavior, exactly. But one of these friends is staggering heavily toward the cab, and the others are physically having to hold him upright.
It's a scene most of you listening have probably witnessed or maybe even been adjacent to at some point in your lives. The late night stumble out of a venue.
And the handoff is what really strikes me as chilling when you view it in retrospect. The friends essentially fold this guy into the back of the cab.
Just pushing him in.
Yeah, and one of the friends who is actually laughing while he says this leans in and tells the driver, take him home. He lives on Pine Street, apartment 12, I think.
I think. That's the part that gets me.
Right, and then the passenger just collapses onto the seat. The driver writes that he felt like a sack of laundry, mumbling something incoherent that could have been a thank you or just another drink order.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, The social dynamics at play in this exact moment are incredibly revealing about how we treat vulnerability.
How so?
Look at the mechanics of what just happened. These friends are cheerfully outsourcing a potentially dangerous level of intoxication to an absolute stranger.
It almost feels callous when you put it that way. But I am curious, is that actual malice on the friend's part? Or is it just a blind assumption that the system, meaning the driver and the taxi service, will automatically handle the problem?
That is the terrifying part. It is almost never malice.
Really?
Nighttime social settings have this strange, distorting power to normalize perilous situations. Consider the context. If you were in a coffee shop at 2 in the afternoon and someone couldn't stand up under their own power,
Right, if they were slipping in and out of consciousness?
exactly, it would be an immediate, terrifying medical emergency. People would be shouting for a doctor or calling an ambulance. But outside a bar at midnight, the context completely shifts the perception.
It's treated as a humorous inconvenience.
Yes. The friends view this staggering, incoherent person not as a medical liability, but as the punchline to their evening.
They convert a health crisis into a logistical problem. Their goal is just to get him out of their immediate vicinity.
Precisely. They bundle him into a cab, give a vague address with a terrifying caveat, I think, and they just wash their hands of the situation. It's a classic diffusion of responsibility.
Wow.
For you listening, think about the times you might have seen a group put someone who could barely stand into a rideshare. We collectively assume that the app or the financial transaction of the ride provides a safety net. But legally and medically, that driver is not a chaperone.
Let's shift to the driver's perspective now, because this is where the illusion of the routine night starts to crack. Reading the source, the driver's mindset is totally transactional at the moment of pickup.
Completely business as usual.
They actually note that they have driven hundreds of drunk passengers before. It comes with the territory.
The driver has an extensive mental filing cabinet of how intoxicated people act in the back of a vehicle. They are prepared for annoying behavior, they're prepared for loud outbursts, and they're prepared for sudden emotional breakdowns.
I'm looking at the driver's notes right here, and they mention prepping for exactly those usual behaviors. Waiting for the guy to start singing, or crying, or suddenly deciding the driver is his best friend in the entire world.
But this passenger didn't do any of that, did they?
No. And that deviation from the pattern is what initiates the tension. The source notes one highly specific, eerie detail. It was quiet. Too quiet.
Yeah.
The passenger's head is resting against the cold window, and as the taxi moves through the streets, the neon city lights are just sliding across his face in the darkness.
It's such a cinematic image.
The driver mentions glancing in the rearview mirror continuously, just waiting for the heavy snoring to start or waiting for the guy to shift his weight in the seat. But there is absolutely nothing, just stillness.
I want to ask everyone listening, what stands out to you about that specific detail? Because psychologically, it is profound.
The silence.
Yes. When we think of danger, or when we imagine an emergency unfolding, we usually picture a loud, intrusive event. We picture a sudden crash, a loud scream, a physical obstacle jumping into our path.
Something obvious.
Right. But here, the driver's survival instinct isn't triggered by a sudden presence, it is triggered by an absence.
The absence of snoring, the absence of movement, the absence of basic human rustling.
It's the raw psychology of instinct. Human brains are phenomenal pattern recognition machines. The driver's brain has learned the pattern of a drunk passenger, which involves noise and erratic movement.
So when the noise isn't there.
When the brain registers the lack of that normal, expected sound, it sends up a flare. This shifts the driver from a passive transactional mindset into a sudden state of extreme vigilance.
You can really feel that tension building in the narrative. They're halfway to the address, and the driver starts noticing the physiological clues. It's not just the silence anymore.
No, they notice.
The driver notices the passenger is slumped at an awkward, unnatural angle. And then comes the detail that makes the driver's stomach tighten. The man's chest barely seems to be moving. The breathing looks incredibly shallow.
The visual confirmation of the instinct.
Right, so the driver attempts a verbal intervention. They call over their shoulder, "Hey, buddy, we're almost there." Just testing the waters, trying to break the heavy silence.
And the result of that verbal check is what completely shatters the illusion of the routine fare.
They get no response whatsoever. The isolation of the cab, which earlier felt like a safe, detached observational bubble, suddenly feels like a trap.
When you say the social contract mutates at this moment, What do you mean by that baseline contract in the context of a taxi?
Well, the baseline social contract in this environment is purely economic and highly limited. I pay you a fee, and you operate a vehicle to move me from point A to point B.
Right, a simple transaction.
The driver is responsible for traffic safety, but not for the passenger's internal biological state. But in that moment of silence, the contract breaks down and mutates into a profound moral obligation.
The driver is forced to transition from providing a service to providing emergency caregiving.
Yes. The physical act of pulling over is described so vividly. The driver feels a cold chill creeping over them, realizing they are the only person left to intervene. They pull the cab over under a lone streetlight.
It's a stark image.
It really is. The sudden isolation of the parked cab under that single pool of light is like a spotlight turning on over a sudden emergency stage. The rest of the dark, bustling city just falls away. It's just the driver, the unconscious passenger, and the hum of that streetlight.
It focuses the entire world down to the claustrophobic space of that back seat. All the noise, the laughter, the music from the bar, it's all miles away now.
The driver steps out into the cool night air, opens the back door, and says, "Sir." They reach out and gently shake the man's shoulder.
And what happens?
The source describes the terrifying physics of that moment. The passenger's head just rolls loosely with the motion, offering zero resistance and zero response. He doesn't wake up. He doesn't even groan.
That physical action, opening the door, reaching into the liminal space, and making physical contact is the exact moment the driver officially accepts the burden of the situation. They cross the boundary from observer to participant.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the narrative pauses the immediate action to give us the driver's internal monologue about the weight of their profession.
It's a powerful moment of reflection.
The driver reflects that working behind the wheel of a taxi teaches you a vast array of skills. It teaches you immense patience with difficult people. It gives you an encyclopedic street knowledge of the city.
Sure.
It teaches you to anticipate human unpredictability. But above all of those things, it teaches you responsibility. The driver realizes that the moment someone steps into that car, regardless of how intoxicated or incapacitated they are, their ultimate safety becomes the driver's job.
Which is a remarkable, almost heroic standard to hold yourself to, especially when you contrast it with the behavior we saw at the beginning of the night.
With the friends.
Yes. The passenger's actual friends, the people who know him and presumably care about him, abandoned that exact same responsibility just minutes earlier. They chose ignorance.
They really did.
The driver, a total stranger, acknowledges a duty of care that the immediate community completely ignored.
And the driver doesn't hesitate once they realize the gravity of the situation. Their hands are moving, dialing emergency services. They describe the situation to the dispatcher with total clarity, just cutting through any panic.
They give the symptoms.
Yeah. Intoxicated passenger, unconscious, shallow breathing, not responding to physical stimuli. But after they hang up, then comes the wait.
The hardest part.
The source perfectly captures the subjective distortion of time in a crisis. The driver notes that the wait for the ambulance was realistically only a few minutes, but those minutes felt like an agonizing hour.
Anyone who has ever waited for an ambulance or waited for help during a medical emergency knows that exact feeling of time dilation. Every single second feels incredibly heavy.
It just drags on.
You are suspended in this terrifying state of helplessness. You have initiated the rescue, but you lack the medical tools to actually fix the problem, so you are just forced to watch someone who is incredibly vulnerable, hoping they hold on.
The physiological response to that helplessness has to be overwhelming. The driver is flooded with adrenaline, standing on the side of a dark road, feeling the immense weight of this stranger's life resting entirely on their shoulders.
It is a massive spike in cortisol and adrenaline with nowhere for that physical energy to go because the required action is simply to wait.
Finally, the flashing red and blue lights appear in the rearview mirror, cutting through the darkness. The ambulance pulls up, and the paramedics step out.
The cavalry arrives.
And the source makes a point to highlight the sharp contrast between the driver's internal state and the paramedic's demeanor. The driver has been internally panicking, but the paramedics arrive with what the driver describes as calm efficiency.
That calm efficiency highlights the different layers of professional detachment at play in a city at night. The paramedics have a protocol. They operate with clinical precision because they are trained to process the medical reality of the situation, entirely detached from the emotional panic.
Right, they just get to work.
They immediately check his pulse, verify his airway, and shine a light to check his pupil dilation. They step directly into the center of the taxi driver's nightmare and treat it as their everyday routine. The driver had no protocol for this crisis. Their only protocol was for driving.
The resolution to the tension happens so fast, but it is felt so deeply through the text. One of the paramedics, after examining the passenger, gives a slight nod and delivers the best news possible. He's breathing. Good thing you called.
Just massive relief.
The driver describes the wave of relief as feeling like cool rain after a long, dry day. You can practically feel the physical tension evaporating from the driver's muscles just reading that sentence. The adrenaline crashes.
But the psychological resolution doesn't stop with the medical update. As the passenger is loaded onto a stretcher and safely secured in the back of the ambulance, another paramedic pauses.
Yeah, this part is great.
Before closing the heavy doors of the ambulance, he looks directly at the taxi driver and says, "You did the right thing."
You did the right thing. 5 simple words, but in that context, they mean absolutely everything. It is the official validation that the driver's instinct, that flag raised by the absence of sound, was correct.
It wasn't an overreaction.
Exactly. The ambulance drives away, the sirens fading back into the ambient noise of the city, and the driver is left standing there, eventually sitting back down alone in the taxi, just staring at the empty back seat in the rearview mirror.
It completely recontextualizes the environment. Just an hour earlier, that back seat was a space for a routine fare, a simple economic transaction. But now, the entire meaning of the vehicle and the night itself has been irrevocably altered.
So what does this all mean for us? The driver synthesizes this intense experience with a beautiful realization toward the end of the source. They note that spending your nights behind the wheel has a way of reminding you that the job is so much more than navigating from point A to point B.
It's so true.
Sometimes you're just a silent witness to the city. Sometimes you're a temporary confidant for a lonely passenger. And sometimes, completely without expecting it, you are the only thing standing between a stranger and a tragedy.
This raises an important question about the invisible safety nets that operate in our society and who actually maintains them. We like to think that we are protected by our immediate communities, by our friends, and by the formal systems we put in place.
The people closest to us.
But in this story, the immediate community failed. The friends failed to recognize the danger, or they willingly chose to ignore it, failing to protect one of their own. The safety net that actually caught this young man wasn't his social circle.
Oh.
It was an observant stranger. It was a person working a grueling night shift who noticed an absence of sound, trusted their human instinct over the ease of ignoring the problem, and chose to accept a moral obligation that would have been so easy to drive away from.
It fundamentally shifts how we should view the people working the service jobs around us every single day. They are often the invisible glue holding the fragile nighttime economy together.
Without a doubt.
And that leads me to a thought I want to leave you with today. For you listening, I want you to mull this over the next time you're out late. When we hop into a cab, or when we hand over our safety or the safety of our friends to an absolute stranger, we assume the transaction is purely financial.
We pay a fee, we expect a service.
We get a service, and we expect the system to work. But what if the ultimate safety net in our society isn't our institutions, our laws, or even our closest friends? What if the ultimate safety net is actually the unspoken social contract that a stranger working the night shift will care enough to notice when we stop breathing? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.